Welcome to the Design Vault, a show about the past, present, and future of design. The Design Vault is a conversation hosted by Shum and Thamer Abanami, reflecting on iconic products and ideas from the past and rethinking them from new perspectives.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Design Vault. I'm Thamer.
And I'm Albert. Today we have an exciting episode where we're going to talk about the incredible story of the Polaroid SX-70. It's one of the most revolutionary cameras ever created. And it's really not just about photography equipment. It's a masterpiece of industrial design. And there was so many innovation ranging from the chemical required to actually make the film, but also really transform the way we capture and share memories.
Exactly. The SX-70 story actually begins with a simple question from a child back in 1943. And the child asked, "Why can't I see the picture now?"
Yeah, why not?
And the innocent curiosity inspired a huge leap in photography. But before we jump straight into the SX-70, we should probably rewind and talk about how photography developed up until that point. Albert, let's give our listeners a bit of context about photography's evolution. Understanding this bigger picture, I think, will highlight why the SX-70 was such a breakthrough. I think that context would be helpful.
Yeah, if you kind of go back in our little time machine, in 1840s, that's when the first negative photography, I think it was called a colotype, was introduced, and it allowed people to reproduce images. And then in 1851, wet collodion process improved the image quality and allowed for more portable darkrooms. And by 1870s, dry play process eliminated this need for immediate processing. You think about it, you had to carry all this equipment and then immediately process it in these complex techniques.
Then I think you get Kodak.
Yeah, 1888.
1888. And Kodak camera had this famous slogan, "You press the button, we do the rest." And they simplified photography. And the way it worked is you would literally send the camera back to them.
Remove all that complexity. Right?
And they would take the film out, develop it, and then send you back the pictures and then the camera with the film in it. And so you can start seeing this trend of removing friction. And in 1900, the Brownie camera, and I think that's a Kodak camera, sold for $1, bringing photography to everyday families. And in 1925, you get Leica's 35 millimeter format, which they took film from the motion picture industry, that format, and ushered in things like modern photojournalism that allowed a lot more speed in photography. And what's fascinating is despite all these leaps, one major hurdle remained. You couldn't see your photo the instant you took it. And that's where Edwin Land and Polaroid enter the story. So in 1943, the child who asked the question was Edwin Land's daughter. Edwin Land was on vacation, snapped a photo of his 3-year-old daughter, Jennifer, and she asked, "Why can't I see the picture now?" And that spark kicked off a whole new chapter in photography. But first, we should talk about Edwin Land. Albert, can you fill us in on Edwin Land's background and his journey? He's a larger-than-life character and an inspiration to a lot of people who came after.
Yeah, he really is. And back to that moment of inspiration, which kind of sparked this curiosity. And Lamb was deeply curious about optics. How do you manipulate light from a very early age? He went to Harvard but dropped out after one semester because he felt it was too slow, and famously snuck into the Columbia University labs at night to continue his own experiments. So his early years of experimentation, curiosity was really the spark of that innovation mindset. Being born in 1909, he showed early genius, and he invented his first practical synthetic polarizing film in the 1930s. And by 1932, he co-founded Land Wheelwright Laboratories, which later became Polaroid in 1937.
There's something really interesting about Edwin Land's story. He goes to Harvard, drops out after a semester, moves to New York, You said sneaking into Columbia. I heard break.
Yeah, after hours. That's back to that passion.
I read that he broke in. I hear that he snuck in, so I don't know what the reality is.
It
But
depends
there's
on
a passion.
whose perspective you take. Is it breaking in or is it sneaking in?
Yeah, and he liked huge problems, and he felt that if a problem wasn't hard, it wasn't worth pursuing. And so, talk about commitment. We're now with Polaroid. Polaroid took its name from polarizers, and polarizers have a lot of practical applications.
And he invented that polarizing film in 1930s.
Yeah. We kind of get into now this wartime era where Polaroid was enlisted by the government to contribute to the effort. And so they did a lot of things that were classified military projects, but you could easily see how he developed new optics for aerial reconnaissance, Polaroid goggles, et cetera, night vision systems, you name it.
Yeah, exactly. It was an era of big momentous technology shift. And I think there was been a lot of discussion about how World War II drove a lot of new inventions.
100%. And then we get to 1943, the fateful question from his daughter. And by 1947, in just a quick leap of 4 years, Land was able to demonstrate the first working prototype at an optical society meeting, producing a black and white photo in under a minute. It was under controlled conditions, et cetera, but that's kind of miraculous.
Yeah, you can imagine people in that room, in that community, where they were stunned. Wow, this is for the first time. You didn't have to wait days, if not weeks, for your photo to come back. So Polaroid launched the Model 95 camera in 1948, and it sold out instantly. It was a big hit, though it still involved a kind of this messy peel-apart film with chemical coatings. It was still a huge leap forward.
Yeah, it was a huge leap forward. But again, it did something special, but it wasn't necessarily the magic that Land was envisioning. You had to open the camera, take the photo out, peel away some stuff, and then apply a chemical. You had to do a bunch of stuff, and then you got your photo. Still a huge leap, but I think Edwin Land and Polaroid had this vision of it just happening magically, and they were pursuing that aggressively.
Yeah, this idea of like one-step photography. No fuss, no mess, no peeling, and which brings us to 1972 and the Polaroid SX-70.
The age of miracles. A pocket size, folding, electronically controlled, motor-driven, single lens reflex camera that quite simply does the impossible. Come a bit closer. The Polaroid SX-70 land camera.
When the SX-70 debuted in 72 or 1972, it was both an engineering marvel and a cultural phenomenon.
Absolutely. It introduced integral film with 17 layers of specialized chemistry that could develop in daylight. Wow, think about that. Like 17 layers. And a folding SLR camera design, SLR being single lens reflex. And even a flat battery built into each film pack to power everything. That's a lot of crazy number of innovations and breakthroughs rolled into one device.
Yeah, it took 30 years almost from the moment his daughter asked the question for him to realize the vision. And this happened because they had a lot of amazing chemists, some of the best in the world, working at Polaroid. Polaroid was renowned for its chemical engineering and advancements, and they were aggressively patenting all the stuff as they went along. And Edwin Land was a master of the theatrical. So at the launch, Land...
Big show.
Yeah, big show. In fact, in many articles and books, it is referenced that Steve Jobs looked up to Land and was inspired by Land when he moved to becoming a showman and releasing Apple products on the big stage.
The one more thing.
All these things, exactly. During the launch, Land pulls this folded camera from his pocket at Polaroid's annual shareholder meeting and took 5 instant photos. And just for things to be perfect, he had 10,000 tulips flown in just for the color demonstrations.
Why not? That's great. And when you talk about showmanship, I think that's way up there, one of the best. I think Land's showing that, especially when you have such a complicated device with so many parts and so many breakthrough innovations. How do you simplify it in a way that people get it instantly? Literally, not just the film, but the idea that you could take images and be instant, and that no fuss, no mess approach. He also worked with artists to help make this technology more accessible, but also more approachable. So he worked with Andy Warhol, David Hockney, and Ansel Adams, who quickly adopted the SX-70 into their work, making sure that its relevance in the cultural status was way up there.
There's so much interesting stuff here. The personalities, the challenge, the culture and the art, the showmanship. But really it comes down to this convergence of innovations. So we have all these breakthroughs, things like optical and mechanical breakthroughs, chemical engineering and material science breakthroughs, electronics and power, manufacturing innovations, user experience, business model, all. So we should probably get into it, Albert.
Yeah, let's break it down a bit more.
Yeah, on the optical and mechanical breakthroughs, it's a folding SLR design that collapsed to be about an inch thick, which is crazy. And then you have this precision engineered mirror system with over 200 parts and a 4-element f8 lens and an SLR viewfinder in pocket form.
Well, and also I think the chemical and material science innovation, that's why it took you. Like chemical, like you don't just like, hey, we're going to whip up instant film. You have to really study chemistry and integral film with multiple precise chemistry layers, back to that 17 layers. They all had to work together and into a self-contained pod that didn't require peeling or messy chemical leftovers after you peel it. That was so special because those 17 layers, once you took the photos and broke up the pod, the chemicals spread through the film with precise timing. It wasn't just random. And those dye layers, that's what really controlled the image formation.
Yeah, it's crazy. The film had this self-contained developer pods. So there was no peeling or chemical levers. And for people who don't know what the developer pod is, if you know the thick border on the bottom of a Polaroid, that holds the chemicals.
Right.
And so when the rollers...
And you squeeze, and it squeezes
the
out.
roller is coming out, squeezes these chemicals out and spread them evenly onto the film, which is crazy. And then special timing and dye controlling image formation. Then you get into electronics and power, flat battery pack in each film pack, which powers the ejection and electronics. Then we get into manufacturing innovations, Albert.
Yeah, and the manufacturing required, because they're not just making a camera, they're making the film, they're making the processes. So you require a lot of custom machinery for the multi-layer optical assemblies. The film chemistry requires specialized equipment for handling. And then the actual body of the camera itself was leather wrapping with a really premium finish. So like all these, like back to like, it's not even just about the pixel and the atoms. It's just making sure everything all came together with high level of craftsmanship.
Amazing. And then the user experience, single button operation, minimal fuss. You press the button and there's a photo.
Yeah, the UI was just like, it was immediate. Like you didn't have to like, open the lens and figure out like what lens to use and hey, where's the shutter button or what f-stop to use? Like all these dials and knobs, it just had one clearly marked red button that allow you to point and shoot.
And then the magic of the image slowly appearing in front of you, I think, is quite special.
Yeah, we'll probably go more into that. There was a whole ritual almost
100%
experience. I mean, there's songs written about it.
And then we get into business model, which I think is fascinating. Affordable camera, quote unquote, even though it was a high price point, but really it's the proprietary film and the recurring revenue from the film. I wouldn't call the SX-70 affordable, but eventually Polaroid got to these affordable. Accessible, yes.
Yeah.
Versus what was around then, yes.
Yeah, versus specialized equipment.
Yes.
Or professional equipment.
You can see why Land was obsessed with this. I think he had a vision that to make this accessible and to change the game and to change photography, you needed to remove all that friction and you need to make the user experience super, super simple.
It's always hard in a podcast to talk about something so iconic. And with any design journey, you have to start with kind of the user first and user intent. I think what Land and Polaroid did really well was to make sure the humans at the center. And they enlisted Henry Dreyfuss, who himself, in some ways, was one of the major pioneers of human-centered design and ergonomics. And Henry Dreyfuss took a step back with his team and apply some really clear user-centered, human-centered design approach to making this camera come together.
And just to be clear to listeners, as we get into this design and what makes it iconic, this camera has two distinct states, closed and open, and it's almost theatrical.
Exactly. And I think back to being human-centered, I think Henry Dreyfuss and team really thought through that, hey, there's a closed state, like when it's closed, and how do you carry it? Where do you put it on your body? Is this something you put in a bag? Is this something you put a lanyard around? What's the weight consideration? When it's closed, it's a sleek leather brown rectangle. When it's open, it unfolds in this high precision photographic tool where that transformation gesture, it really, really becomes part of that user experience. And the key iconic elements is that polished metal combined with fine leather finish. It's something that really stands out. It's almost like a personality. Like you look at it, oh, that's a SX-70. And then that slim profile with the metallic finish, that showed there was a premium. There's a something that actually you want to touch and hold on to. And then in the open gesture, it has very minimalistic control. So it's not overwhelming. And you immediately back to understand, like, hey, here's where you put your eye and look into, and you see where the lens is going to be pointing at. And then there's only two controls where you can control how much light goes into the lens, and then you click the little red button. And that's it.
It elevated photography from a technical pro thing to this emotional, immediate ceremony, and it's a huge part of its legacy.
Yeah. It's design influence. It's you'd see it even today from cameras to smartphones, how the powerful design can shape user experience. But more importantly, I think this is the first time, at least I can recall, where back to it seems kind of like a weird thing, user generated content, like the image became something you created, but also you can share immediately.
So one of the magical things about the SX-70 and the Polaroid cameras that came after it was this kind of one-step thing of the photo comes out and it develops in front of your eyes. We've probably both done this hundreds of times in our life. Do you have any stories of memories of using a Polaroid camera?
Yeah, the first time I used it, I remember, wow, this goes way back. I was probably a teenager. I was going to a wedding, and I had this Polaroid camera strapped in from my neck. And I would be running around, maybe even younger. Maybe I was like 10. I was running around the wedding and taking pictures of people. And I was that little annoying kid saying, hey, look over here. and what was really cool was once I got the Polaroid, I could show people, and people would all huddle around and say, wow, look at this. And people love looking at themselves, especially at a wedding where they're all dressed up and lovely looking people having fun. And being a kid, being the center of that, you just felt really special. Like, wow, I could help bring people together through the things I was creating just with this little magic camera. So that to me was that spark of, wow, creating things that people can use and you could share with others.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I would take pictures at home of my family or of my friends out, on the block. But the thing that sticks with me, Albert, is the sound. The sound of you take the picture, that those kind of that sound, and
I feel like they use it in like Star Wars R2-D2. Like, like every time that you see like a mechanical thing, that's a Polaroid. It's amazing. Or is that like Blade Runner?
I think maybe, I don't know, might have, but let's kind of explain what's happening when that photo comes out, right? When you press the shutter, this is where the chemistry gets wild. Remember, people used to have dark rooms, and now there's no more dark room.
It's a bit geeky, but I think it's worth explaining that light goes through the lens, it reflects off mirrors back to SLR, single lens reflex, and exposes the top of the film layer. So you get light coming into the film. Like that's how most photography work. And then an electronic circuit triggers the ejection mechanism, pushing the film through these precise steel rollers so that you can squeeze out the chemical, back to that chemical pod, spreading those layers by 1/1000th of an inch thick. So it's like thinner than hair.
And again, those chemicals are in that thick part of the photo border. That's what's getting squeezed onto as it rolls out.
Yeah, and the opacity layer is also, there's a layer that make sure everything's dark, so shielding light from further entering. You remember, as you roll out the film, you also don't want light to come back in because it would actually ruin the exposure of that film.
Yeah, so many scientists were involved in this, and it was decades. It's amazing. Literally, to the point where you can block more light from coming in while it develops. And so it's when you see this, you see the magic happening. Your blank white square slowly transforms into this fully developed photo in a couple of minutes. It's crazy.
Yeah, and one key problem they had to solve, and if you remember from your high school chemistry class, like temperature affects activation, right? The energy it requires to make a chemical process happen. So temperature sensitivity was really important. And especially if you're in different environments, be indoors, outdoors, because you want this camera to go with you. So Polaroid engineered this timing layers that accounted for different climates. The film had to properly develop whether you were in cool or warm temperatures. So it was designed to work between 65 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit.
Optimal operating condition.
Yeah.
But if you take it out of optimal, you get some fun stuff too.
And then humidity, but also UV protection was required. So they had to add additional layers to the film pack. There's so many conditions and constraints you have to work around in order to create these breakthrough products.
And all of this is in a palm-sized square image that is just the size of a thick piece of paper. No chemical spills, no having to apply chemicals, no peeling. It's really easy to forget how big a deal this was in the 70s. It's still a big deal today because just shows so much human innovation. We've talked about the process, but what made these photos so special aesthetically is that it became these became an iconic medium unto themselves.
Yeah, it's almost like, I don't know if it's by design or it was intended, but for me, it definitely, I think the Polaroid images themselves, a distinct style almost. Maybe it was an unintended consequence of having these different chemicals all working together and making it easy. But the result to me was absolutely stunning in the sense of that you have the instant images, but it was also very identifiable as like, oh, this is a Polaroid shot.
Let's get into the format characteristics, whether it's size, color, just like almost 3 inch by 3 inch, so 3.1 by 3.1 inch square image.
It was surrounded by this iconic white frame.
Right.
Actually, the framing, it obviously, you couldn't bleed to the edge, right? Like because of the chemical again and how it worked. But actually, the framing itself had this iconic. It made it like, oh, that's a Polaroid. And I do think that maybe it was by design that there was this large white border at the bottom where you could write things on.
That's where the chemicals come from. So I think they kind of took this quote unquote constraint and they turned it into a feature.
Yeah. So again, I think being mindful of how it was used, I think they probably studied like, hey, should it be on the top? Should it be on the bottom?
Yeah.
Right? If it was on top, it'd probably be very different. And I think being bottom, so that visually, the visual weight, it kind of anchors things.
And your thumb can pull the photo out and not ruin the image while it's developing.
Yeah.
The image area is 3.1 by 3.1, but when you build in the frame, it's 3.5 by 4.2 inches. And like you said, became this canvas for notes, dates, signatures. And I think, where do we see square images today as a standard?
Right. Obviously, Instagram and even if I go into the detail, the Instagram logo, right, where it was inspired was actually by a Polaroid camera.
Yeah, the one step that came out, the SX-70, had the same, this look and the little rainbow stripe. But I do think the colors also are one of the things that really makes these photos special. They weren't perfectly accurate to reality, but I think that made it part of their charm, Albert.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's for me, it seems kind of weird way to describe this. It felt kind of like this very dreamy, slightly otherworldly color palette. The blues and greens were kind of intensified, while the reds and yellows were a bit more warmer, but also muted. It had this kind of nostalgic quality. It's like that dreamlight quality also had this, I would say, kind of like a soft contrast. It wasn't like a harsh. And the skin tones was actually probably one of the areas that we debatable was good or bad. But a lot of people prefer it because it also had this very raw, almost like the blue shifted towards more teal and cyan. So it wasn't like this natural skin tone, but it felt, I don't want to use that tricky word authentic, but, but the colors continue to evolve. And over time, they continue to add to their uniqueness.
There was something special about the surface and the texture of these images. Unlike glossy traditional prints of that time, the SX-70 photos had this unique finish. It was almost like a semi-gloss surface with incredible depth. And because the chemistry developed inside a transparent plastic window, the SX-70 photos almost had almost a three-dimensional quality. It wasn't, the image wasn't on the surface. It was suspended within this frame.
Right.
It was almost like floating beneath a layer of clear plastic, creating this sense of depth that you wouldn't see in a normal traditional photograph. And the semi-gloss finish was between matte and glossy, and the photos felt substantial in the hand. They were like solid and felt important.
Yeah, there was a permanence to it. I feel like. Yeah.
And there was a heft to it. And the plastic surface could be manipulated while developing, which allowed for creative effects. And if you're curious, there are lots of enthusiasts online that share tips and tricks on this. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think one artist that really stood out was Lucas Samarez, who pioneered what became known as photo transformation. It's almost like DJ we were talking about, like they kind of hacked it and riffed it and made it their own. Using that emulsion to create distortion, that little pod, they were able to create surreal effects. And where after several minutes after it was ejected, they gently press it or to create like painterly effects. And they would even use like wooden stylus back to like hacking to burnish it, to manipulate it while it was being developed.
When you look at the entire aesthetic kind of package, these photos had a quality of making ordinary moments feel special, feel extraordinary. There was something almost, you could say, intrinsically nostalgic about them, even when they were new. Even when the photo just came out. They kind of have this, and you can think about filters and things like that. You still see filters that are very inspired by Polaroid film.
Yeah, and I do want to mention, in terms of that photo transformation, one image that, at least for me, is probably the most iconic was the Peter Gabriel record album. Which album was that? I think it was I remember the song Gamesville Frontier was on it. Yeah, it was the album cover. I think it was referred as Melt, where literally Peter Gabriel's face was melting, and it was a Polaroid picture of Peter Gabriel. And it was so iconic.
Was it Peter Gabriel self-titled?
Yeah, maybe Peter Gabriel. That's why I can remember the album.
Yes, Peter Gabriel. Yes, but released in 1980.
And the album cover design was called Melt, and literally is Peter Gabriel's face melting.
Yeah, it was photographer Les Crims, and it showed an image of Gabriel where the left side of his face appears to be melting. And Les Crims achieved this by repeatedly taking his picture with a Polaroid SX-70 and then using various objects to smear and distort the pictures as they developed. Right. And the photos were taken in color. Then the final distorted image was reshot in black and white, which is crazy. It's a cool album cover. You should check it out.
So I think that really highlights, again, this kind of almost like new aesthetic, new style that SX-70 allow creators to produce.
We should probably talk about the marketing and business strategy of the Polaroid SX-70. Its strategy was just as innovative as the product.
Yeah, definitely. I think Lan and the Polaroid team understood that they were selling a whole new experience. So the product launch strategy was really important. So it did have a premium pricing. I think it launched in 1972 at $180, which today is probably $1,200, which is quite a bit. You think, wow, is that affordable? But I think it was accessible. And I think as we discussed in other episode, there's this interesting kind of diffusion curve in terms of technology. You kind of launch at the premium, and then you diffuse, and over time, as you reduce costs and gain adoption, that S curve, then you make it more affordable, more accessible. And so it was very exclusive. It was limited in the rollout after 1973. They started ramping up production.
Yeah, and Land personally guided the marketing approach, and he wanted to position the SX-70 as a luxury creative tool years before Apple would do something similar. The ads were incredible. Albert, I'd love to kind of get into that with you and the influencer strategy.
Yeah, I think that showmanship we talked about earlier on, it's show, don't tell. I think that's one of the mantras we try to, as any product creator, don't talk about it, like show people what it can do. And the ads were incredible. It was cinematic TV spots, high-end print campaigns, and back to that different posture, it really show off the folding mechanism. When it's folded and then when you open it, it transforms into this magic box, this magic camera. So it showed that emotional impact of instant photography. You take a picture and you can share it and show people. And it also had an influencer strategy where Polaroid worked with, again, artists like Andy Warhol, Walker Evans, David Hockney, Ansel Adams to show what you can do with a camera like XS70 that other cameras couldn't do. So this Polaroid collection, it was known, was sponsored fine art exhibit. So it legitimizes and it creates, again, back to this idea that real artists were using it, but also you can use it too. So it quickly gained adoption with emerging photographers and artists.
And that white frame developing with color is basically free advertising also. When you see this in front of you, it's the shared special moment you talked about.
Yeah, they really emphasized that in their ad campaign, these shared moments. They had folks, images of folks huddling around to watch the image appear. That was truly unique. And traditional photography never offered that sense of community, that communal experience that we kind of take for granted today.
Yeah,
that's such a powerful unlock that I'm sure Lan and team didn't even imagine when his daughter asked that simple question.
I'd love to talk about how the business evolves. So over time, Polaroid faces this classic challenge of bringing down costs.
How do you scale something
to
make adoption better while at the same time making the costs more accessible?
Yeah, and so they launched simpler models later, like the One Step, to reach a wider audience. They had also cost reduced some of the SX-70, where they replaced leather with plastic, lower the price. But really, it's the One Step, which comes in at $40 retail, simplifying the design.
And that was 1977, right? So in what, 3-4 years?
It's about 4 years, and or 5, depending on how you count from like the launch to when they really ramped up production. But you go from 180 to 40.
Right.
That is the camera that my family bought, the One Step, right? And it was accessible. That was the camera that I used when I was a kid, and it was amazing.
When I press this button, a new era in photography begins. Polaroid introduces Sonar Automatic Focusing. This camera sends out inaudible sound waves that bounce off the subject and return in a split second. The lens automatically rotates to perfect focus. You can get a precisely focused picture every time in minutes at the touch of one button. The new Sonar One Steps from Polaroid, the world's simplest cameras.
It made it accessible to a lot more people, and became, I think the One Step is really key to making it the cultural mainstay that it is, right? This style of photography. And then you have Kodak jumping into this instant photography market with cheaper alternatives, which sparks this major legal battle. And I want to kind of get into this, Albert. Polaroid eventually wins almost $1 billion, like $909 million from Kodak in 1990.
So Kodak launched their own line of instant cameras? Is that...
Yes. This resulted in a drawn-out lawsuit. And maybe I think we should kind of take a step back and talk about the dynamics of Polaroid and Kodak. Because, in the early days, if you go back to when Edwin Land did the polarizer.
Or even before that, like the Kodak Brownie, right?
All right, yeah. So Kodak was the hegemon of photography.
Right.
They were the big player. They made cameras.
They were the standard.
They were the standard. They made cameras and they made film. And everybody bought their film. So basically, if the photo industry did well, Kodak did well, even if people didn't buy their cameras, because they had a lock on film and a lot of other parts of this supply chain and value chain. But here's some trivia for you. Polaroid's first customer for polarizers was Kodak.
Huh. So they were supplier to Kodak.
That's how that was the first major customer of Polaroid.
Ah.
Later on, Kodak becomes a supplier to Polaroid as they're developing through the generations of the black and white instant photography with the peel away film, the color instant photography with the peel away stuff. During these phases, they were strong partners. Kodak was of the belief that what's good for photography is good for Kodak,
Right.
and it lifts all boats.
Right. You're going to market, right?
But yes, we're going to market. And Polaroid had pursued a very strategic and proactive patent strategy from the beginning of their founding. And so these two things are true, but this third thing happens, which is there is a change in leadership at Kodak. And this new leadership in Kodak was a little bit less, hey, what's good for photography is good for us. They saw this giant market in instant photography. Polaroid was engaging them on creating a new deal, a supplier deal where they would have to create a bunch of NDAs to share some of their chemistry so they could develop these new film technologies for the SX-70. And that's where it gets tricky.
So Kodak saw this opportunity and thought, like, hey, I want some of that.
Yes. And why are we being so nice to Polaroid? They need us. They can't do this without us. So we want a bigger cut. We want some cut of the we want some cut that isn't just us selling them wholesale film.
So Kodak launched their own instant camera, I think in 1976.
Yes. And Polaroid sues them for patent infringement. And over many, 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 many years, this goes on until 1990, where there's a $909 million settlement in Polaroid's favor. But here's the rub. Ironically, both Kodak and Polaroid missed the real disruption.
So they were so focused on each other, they missed out what was happening around
I think so. They had,
in some ways. I mean, at least that's one way to look at it.
Yeah, there's two things. They were so focused on legacy business.
Right. Just
And
protecting.
And because both of them did develop digital cameras, and both of them, in fact...
so digital photography came along while they were still fighting it out.
Yes, digital photography came along while they're fighting it out on patents on chemical processes and things. But also, the DNA of these companies was chemical engineering. And so you could see it's hard for them. There's just a bias. It was very hard for them to kind of pivot to digital. And it's this powerful reminder that you can be super innovative, but you can have blind spots. Edward and Ed could do no wrong for many decades until this disruption.
Yeah, that's so crazy. So they won this drawn-out patent lawsuit in 1990, but by 2001, Polaroid declared bankruptcy.
Yes.
And they discontinued instant film by 2008.
Yes.
And that's just kind of crazy, like such a tectonic shift, like in such a short time.
Yes, it was later revived by something called the Impossible Project.
Right.
Kodak also filed for bankruptcy in 2012. So these giant, pillars of industry and innovation are gone by the wayside.
The standard. Yeah.
But we hear this so many times in the design vault of companies
and products.
Companies and products unable to navigate this digital transition.
Right, because another disruption comes along, or a new emerging technology that fundamentally shifts the marketplace.
I think there's a ton of broader takeaways and lessons that we get into before we wrap. One thing I think is interesting is that the power of vertical integration is what made this user experience so amazing.
Yeah, let's break it down. Like that vertical integration, it's it's such a for me that sounds kind of obscure. Vertical integration, that's a very techie business term. But for me, as a product maker, it's the ability to kind of control all the steps it takes to make a product.
Yes.
Like if you want like high craftsmanship, precision, and making sure everything all comes together the way you designed it, making sure that you have control of all those processes, all those steps is actually one of the best way. And the classic example is Apple, right? They control every piece that goes into their product.
100%. You can think of this also as a strategy, a platform strategy, right? This proprietary film creates this customer lock-in, right?
Right. It was a bit of a razor blade kind of.
Totally.
So you had you create the standard, and then everyone has to adopt that standard in the ecosystem.
Yes.
So the film cartridges themselves, you can only use Polaroid film cartridges. You can't use anyone else.
Totally. And then you get to this. I see this pattern of reducing friction increases TAM, and here they expanded their market through simplification, hiding all this.
Yeah,
right?
I think TAM is one of those.
Not everybody knows what TAM is.
Well, it's
Explain to them, Albert. Explain to the people.
TAM is short for total addressable market. It's kind of a geeky word, but it's one of the most contentious, because a lot of startups, a lot of product teams, when you pitch a new idea, you always pitch this like, wow, our TAM is so big, meaning our and look,
yeah, and hard to believe.
Such a massive opportunity that we have. Oh man, if we create this product, it's gonna allow us to capture this TAM. And the reality is, it's not that easy.
No, but Polaroid did create market expansion through simplification.
Well, I think that's
right?
the key thing, right? There's market creators, like creating the market, versus trying to gain access to an existing market. And I think that's where addressable market. I think a lot of people, you have to have that belief that there's this new opportunity and you could be a market creator.
Yes,
and it's a big opportunity, but it's also, as we all know, it's big risk.
Yes,
it's hard.
Yes, and another thing that hit me when we looked at this and did the research is recurring revenue streams can create inertia and bias. Right? They were making money on this really.
Well, it's your legacy, right? Like you've been making, it's your cash cow.
Yeah, it's a cash cow. I'm selling these film cartridges for a really good margin.
Right, I've been taking that cow to the market, and
this
we've been selling.
Digital thing is happening, but I'm making money here. I'll throw some research dollars at digital, but really, and we've seen, how large corporations, a lot of large corporations will have these
in
R&D hedges.
Pretty much every industry, right?
Right, but they won't necessarily take that step, right, because it conflicts with their primary business model today.
Yeah, and what makes you successful in your core business is actually, in some ways, what holds you back from growing new businesses.
Yes,
100%.
100%.
And we're oversimplifying the innovator's
dilemma.
dilemma.
There's a lot to unpack here, but this is definitely something that I think struck us both during this conversation and the research. And then there's the competition side. There's a really great book that I'll put in the show notes called "The Triumph of Genius," and it was written by one of the patent lawyers that was working with Edwin Land, and he had a front row view.
Well, I know patent lawyers write amazing, pot boilers.
Yes, I think Danielle Steele was a patent lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. A lot of my favorite authors are patent lawyers. But I think that rivalry is really fascinating. And if you're interested in kind of the dynamics of co-opetition, this book is amazing. It's
okay, caveat. One of my best friends is a patent lawyer, so I'm not...
They're the most lovable lawyers, I think, are the patent lawyers. They're my favorite. Yeah. But, it's really wild that they both had early digital technology, Kodak and Polaroid, but they never really were able to pivot.
Yeah, and that pivot, I mean, there's whole podcast books written about that pivot. Sorry. But it's really understanding that technical capability is not enough.
Yes.
You can't just pivot saying, hey, I'm going to go after this new technology and back to your customer, your entire infrastructure, supply chain, your entire business model and culture exists in your core products. And just to say you pivot, I think that's we're learning that even today, especially in the age of AI. Everyone's pivoting to AI, but it doesn't mean you can be successful. And I think the SX-70 is still the masterpiece of innovative integrated design. And yet, if you're not able to pivot, you're not going to be able to continue that success.
Yeah, I think the SX-70 was the vision of Polaroid. Is the high point of the company. Everything that came after it was based on it. Everything that was successful, and it really shows us how a single product can define and sometimes constrain a company's identity.
Ultimately, SX-70 is about transformation. It's the camera itself unfolds. It's a blank square that becomes a instrument to capture memory that you can share instantly. So it moved photography from this purely technical experience to, in some ways, an emotional experience.
When you can see a picture developing before your eyes, blooming in minutes into a photograph as real as life itself, it makes you eager to grab hold of the world. Almost effortlessly, the SX-70 slips through life, searching out, recording. Press the button. There it is. It's as simple as that. Polaroid's SX-70 land camera.
Land had this famous quote, which you see time and time again in his work: "Don't undertake a project unless it is manifestly important and nearly impossible." And I think the SX-70 embodied that ambition. And it really united this groundbreaking science with human joy.
Yeah, that human joy is still with us today, right? This idea, especially in digital,
Yes.
where I could take a photo of myself and while we're outdoors, be on a hike and share it instantly with my friends and family. That's living proof of how visionary the SX-70 design was and its user experience. It shifted an entire industry, but also in some ways shifted our culture.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Design Vault. We hope this deep dive into the Polaroid SX-70 gave you new insights and sparked your curiosity about the design and thinking behind the products that shape our world.
And if you enjoyed this journey, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend. Until next time, keep looking at the world through the lens of great design.